Welcome back to Crawford-Clark Close-Up as we're making our way through the Pixar back catalogue in anticipation of this summer's The Incredibles 2, which is nearly upon us. We come now to the movie that got audiences rubbing their eyes unexpectedly within the first 10 minutes. It's Pixar's 10th and arguably most emotional film, Up. It's interesting to note from the outset that Up, released back in 2009, started out as an entirely different kind of adventure. Director Pete Docter, returning to the director's chair 7 years after he made his mark with the cherished Monsters Inc., is at the helm here and has said in interviews since the film's release that Up changed the most of almost any Pixar film from the early stages of writing to the finished product. Up actually began less with a septuagenarian in a floating house than with an entire floating city with two brothers that resembled something out of the Muppets who were going to inherit this city as heirs to the throne. As with all of Pixar's protagonists, if you can't relate to them and empathise with them along the way, then something needs to change. So the idea was quickly scrapped in favour of a curmudgeonly old man, a widower after the first 10 minutes of the film, we'll get to that, flying off on an adventure to escape the morbid reality that he will have to leave his cherished house that he lived in with his wife for so many years to live in an old people's home. There's little surprise that this is the most relatable and touching Pixar film up to this point with that premise. Up begins with a young, bespectacled Carl and his obsession with the adventurer Charles Muntz, who quickly discovers a young girl his own age, Ellie, who shares his passion and spirit for adventure. Ellie inducts a timid Carl into her adventure club, of which there are only 2 members, and proceeds to show Carl the MacGuffin of the film, her adventure book, that is starting to be filled with cuttings of the adventures she wants to embark upon. She now has a like-minded companion to share this with. It's a quick setup before the montage to end all montages that even the toughest-skinned viewer will find hard not to get emotional over. We see Carl and Ellie through the joys of their wedding day, to the sorrow of losing their child, to the little pleasures of Ellie tying Carl's tie every day as he heads out to work, to the everyday frustrations of life when you're trying to make savings for holidays, and then setbacks cause you to put your dreams to one side. Things begin to look optimistic as a now elderly Carl decides to surprise Ellie with a picnic and travel tickets for Paradise Falls so they can finally embark on their adventure. Until Ellie collapses and is hospitalised. I think you know the rest. It's at once an uplifting and devastating opening to Carl and Ellie's story, and hands down, one of Pixar's finest achievements. It's amazing to believe that originally this montage was to include dialogue and to strip away returning composer Michael Giacchino's score, which picked up the Oscar that year. Thankfully, the Pixar creatives decided to change their minds, and the end result is a sobering start to what will later ironically become one of the funniest Pixar features. If you've managed to wipe all your tears away yet, we now find Carl living alone, contemplating what the future will hold, all the while calling out to Ellie in the hope that she can still hear him, and that she approves of his decisions. We see that Carl and Ellie's house is the only one left on what has now become a building site, and Carl is refusing to move. It's only when Carl makes his mistake, hitting a building contractor with his walking frame when the contractor runs into his and Ellie's postbox, that Carl is landed in court and must face the prospect of saying goodbye to his home and his memories. In keeping with the spirit of Pixar and adventure, it's time for Carl to disappear. So far, despite its sad, reflective opening, the film has a great pace, and the animation, as expected by now, is stellar. Carl sets off for Paradise Falls in his house with hundreds of balloons, after promising wife Ellie that he'd take them there one day, and we're ready to see what kind of adventures they will have together. That is, until young wilderness explorer Russell inadvertently gets taken on the same journey, sat petrified in mid-air on Carl's doorstep. Like WALL-E before it, at 90 minutes, Up is a lean Pixar adventure, harking back to the days of the earliest Pixar features, that doesn't overstay its welcome. We're quickly introduced to plenty of side characters, from Kevin the snipe, a colourful tropical bird that Russell finds on their way to Paradise Falls, to Doug the talking dog, with a collar that translates into different languages. It's only when we discover that there is a whole pack of talking dogs that the joke starts to wear a little thin and become almost too much a departure in tone from the film's stellar opening. Having said that, there are a couple of brilliantly written moments where Doug gets placed in the cone of shame by the other dogs, and when the dog's owner tells Carl it's a treat to have guests, to which the dogs hear the word and go mad, thinking their master is about to give them a treat. For any dog owner, this is so relatable and accurate. It's a case of be careful what you wish for Carl, as he discovers that his childhood hero, Charles Muntz, is living here in his airship, and he is the master to these dogs. Muntz abruptly turns from inviting host to villain as we discover that Kevin the Snipe is an endangered species, and Muntz has been searching for it for years to add to his collection and return home, boasting about his discovery. What ensues is a battle for survival, and Carl can now physically and symbolically rid himself of the emotional baggage from his house, the heavy furniture literally weighing him down, to go to Kevin and Russell's aid. Before we get to this point, though, there's a moment where Carl and the audience take a well-deserved rest, and Carl leafs through Ellie's old adventure book back in his living room. Carl can't stop the tears as he looks back at photographic memories of his married life with Ellie, and until now, he's always stopped at the page "Stuff I'm Going to Do," thinking that his wife never managed to go on the adventure she'd always dreamed of. What Carl and the audience soon discover is that as Ellie grew up, she realised that the big adventure she'd always dreamed of was right in front of her, with Carl. She was living it every day. We sit with Carl as he observes Ellie's additions to the back of the book and weep as Ellie leaves Carl a parting message. In many ways, this moment is even more effective than the film's powerful opening, as Carl begins to realise that the house itself is replaceable. It's memories in his heart that need to be cherished. Giacchino's score once again hits all the perfect notes over the scene, and it's one of Pixar's most beautiful moments. This is Up's Crawford-Clark close-up standout scene. Something we haven't yet touched on is the once again excellent voice cast. Veteran television actor Edward Asner is the perfect voice for Carl Fredricksen. Jordan Nagai, at only 8 years old whilst filming, is great as Russell, and Christopher Plummer is clearly relishing playing the villain, injecting Muntz with heroism and villainy in equal measure. Muntz is arguably one of Pixar's most villainous of its pantheon of villains, as it's not just a quest for him to retrieve Kevin, but also to taint and destroy Carl and Ellie's memories of looking up to Muntz as a hero during their childhood. It's symbolic that Muntz therefore falls to his death whilst holding on to some of Carl's balloons. Another key aspect of Up's narrative is the idea of Carl becoming a surrogate father figure for Russell, furthermore giving Carl a renewed sense of purpose and belonging in his life. Carl discovers that Russell's own father is distant with him, acting more like a stepfather with no interest in his son, so it's especially touching when it's Carl who ensures he's there at Russell's badge ceremony at the end of the film. Even Russell's mother is looking on at her son with pride. 2009 was a turning point for the Academy Awards. More diverse film genres were being afforded nominations in the highly contested Best Picture category, and for the first time in Pixar's tenure, one of their feature films was nominated for Best Picture of the Year. Up wouldn't take home the Best Picture crown, but winning the Best Animated Feature Oscar for their third consecutive feature cemented Pixar as the best in the business. It was also double celebrations for the film, as Michael Giacchino also deservedly picked up Pixar's first win for Best Original Score. The only other time before Up that Pixar had won an Oscar for one of their songs was for Pete Docter's first film, Monsters, Inc., with If I Didn't Have You, from composer Randy Neiman. Whilst tonally the film can be a little messy at times in the second act, Up is a joy to watch and seems to improve with every watch. It's a sweet tale that can make you laugh and cry in equal measure and reaffirms the spirit of Pixar and the talent of its team. Starting with Ratatouille and over the course of the last 3 films, this was really a golden era for Pixar. Up is ultimately a difficult film to rate. If it was purely down to the film's emotional moments with Carl and Ellie and their memories, it would be essential viewing without a doubt. But judging all aspects of the film, we say,
alrighty then.
Where does Up sit for you in the Pixar back catalogue? In the past, I've been quick to write it off, jumping to the defence of Ratatouille and WALL-E, and praising those films over this. But Up is an entirely different adventure to those aforementioned, with its own merits. Let us know what you thought of this review, and please click subscribe if you like what you see. Come and join us on social media. Look for us on Facebook and Twitter. And you can email us, crawfordclarkcloseup@gmail.com. Let us know if there are ways in which we can improve the channel. We're now officially at the halfway point in our journey through the Pixar films, and up next, it's the film that usually sits firmly on top of fans' lists, Toy Story 3. Tune in to our next review to hear if we think it holds up to the 2 previous chapters in the story. Thanks for watching, and until next time, that's a wrap.